Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. We're hanging out on the Nerd Party Network. That is just a team of podcasts dedicated to bringing you all things entertainment. Check it out at thenerdparty.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. You can also follow us on Instagram at The Nerd Party and like the Facebook page, The Nerd Party. And I am very excited to welcome back to the show, Mr. Richie Pepio. Richie, welcome back.
Hey, it hasn't been that long at all.
Not at all.
Only yesterday we were shitting on WandaVision. Like nobody's
you can
been
hear
mad.
Richie and I go back a long way. You can feel the history in each interaction we have on the show. If you want to hear our most recent interaction and or you want to hate us, you can listen to the Between Takes episode of WandaVision we just did. Or love us. We're the only people speaking the truth about WandaVision right now.
Speaking truth to sitcom power. By the way, Shawn, if they want to hear our first interaction, all they need to do is just listen to the Superman theme, light a candle, and close their eyes. For in that theme,
that's our friendship. The essence of our friendship,
us whispering in their ears.
And speaking of Superman, the movie we're going to be watching is Mulholland Drive, which has absolutely nothing to do with Superman, but does have everything to do with our friendship, I would say. I think the first time I saw this was with you, except you fell asleep while you were
That
watching
explains that, because I was like, I can't remember when I first saw this movie. What I do remember is I didn't see it.
Yes, I was going
remember...
to say technically, because the whole thing of Missing Frames is you have not seen Mulholland Drive, but I thought you had, and you reminded me. You said no, I watched it with you, but I fell asleep.
Yeah, there was a moment I remember in the first couple minutes where I was like, this is interesting, and I vaguely remember flashes, maybe a dumpster, something about Los Angeles, maybe a flash of Naomi Watts, and then like a real a smash cut
Naomi Watts flashing
on
it's just
Naomi Watts yanking open a trench coat, nothing underneath. And I thought, how Lynchian is this? And I do remember there being like a smash cut or some kind of like quick zoom bang moment where there's like a grungy, grimy looking guy just staring right
David
in the
Lynch
camera.
is all about those zoom bang moments.
And then that immediately put me to sleep.
I think that's great. I think that was the intention because the gentleman who witnesses that moment you're describing also kind of has an attack, a panic attack, or just is devastated, and he kind of falls asleep as well. So I think you were empathizing so strongly with that character that you just felt the need.
Spoiler alert, but
to pass out.
Okay,
but,
cool.
Have I told you the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise, but also have I told you the tale of how I discovered David Lynch? Because I've told it. I think if there's one consistency in Missing Frames is that whenever I watch a David Lynch movie, which I think has only happened, I think I did Twin Peaks
the movie,
with John Mills,
Firewalk with me.
Yeah, he's on Aggressive Negotiations. We did Firewalk with Me. We did the whole series, and then I did Blue Velvet with my wife, Sarah, because she had never seen it before. But I feel like I tell this story a lot. Do you know the story?
Of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Well, no, of how
I hear he had the power to...
like Darth Plagueis the Wise, David Lynch does have the power to stop people from dying.
How can I learn this power?
I'll tell you.
So learn this power? I don't remember.
I will, just in case the audience doesn't know, and you can skip ahead if you've heard this before. Our mutual friend, Matthew Schott, who will be in an upcoming episode, a Between Takes episode of Missing Frames, if it's not out already. He is... he's one of my favorite people, and he came to visit me when I was in college. This is probably 2008, I want to say. And I was going to film school. I'd never seen a David Lynch movie before, and Matt had just discovered David Lynch, and he was like, I'm coming to visit you, and I'm going to bring this movie Eraserhead with me. And I was like, okay, I guess. So he came down, we hung out, and it was like almost immediately, it's like, oh, well, you want to watch a movie? I brought Eraserhead. And I was like, yeah, sure, Eraserhead, sure. So we watched it in my little dorm room. and turned off all the lights and on my crappy TV watched Eraserhead, and I was so utterly disturbed by the movie. I again never seen a David Lynch film before, didn't know what to expect, and it's a completely nightmarish film. And you've not seen Eraserhead either, right?
I actually haven't seen most David Lynch movies. I've seen the one with the monkey on Netflix, which is a 20-minute short film.
What did Jack do?
What did Jack do? And I really enjoyed it. And I also for what it was. And I've seen Dune as a fan of the book Dune. And I actually also really enjoyed Dune. I know the story of like how difficult it was, and it really is kind of a famously hard to adapt novel, the science fiction Lord of the Rings. But I think like the art design, the visuals are so amazing. And I do, after seeing that, it almost makes me wish that David Lynch had done some insane mind F. Can I curse on this? I don't know. Mind fart.
Oh, we definitely can't say fart on here.
Yeah, sorry. I don't want to hurt any poop truthers out there. But what I will say is it makes you wish that we got to see like a David Lynchian Return of the Jedi, which
right, because he was one of two directors. Yeah. He was one of the final directors for that George Lucas.
He made it to the boss stage, and then George Lucas
made it to
him.
the boss stage, and then decided not to. Well, I keep forgetting that you haven't seen a whole lot of David Lynch, and I feel like at some point. I know I say it, but I'm saying it to get it on the record and on the internet. But I feel like you would love Twin Peaks. You have to watch it.
I think I would too. I've only seen the first part of the first episode, and I really enjoyed it. But the people I was watching it with were not interested, so we changed it.
Oh no!
I was into it, and what I'm most excited about is to see what happens to George Costanza's mother-in-law after she screams about finding out about her daughter's death. That's as far as I got in the pilot.
Just you wait.
So,
well, that's the story. You know, I saw Eraserhead. It disturbed me deeply, and then the next film I saw was Mulholland Drive, which you were there for. It was another. Matt came to visit me. You came to visit at the same time.
Okay.
We went to the beach. We had a great time, and then Matt was like, "By the way, I brought another David Lynch movie," and Matt is an overpowering and just, he's a force of nature and he's wonderful. And when he wants to watch something, because I can't think of why after watching Eraserhead, I would have wanted to watch Mulholland Drive, but it was kind of like, sure, put it on.
And unfortunately, I slept for Mulholland Drive, but I did watch the True Blood pilot, which we watched together, I think, during that same trip.
Right. You made a wise decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mulholland Drive, I remember liking more than Eraserhead, but also kind of just being like, what did I just watch and not being prepared for it. And the irony is that, a few years later, I think I rewatched Eraserhead and was like, this is the best thing ever. And then I was getting into Twin Peaks. Sarah and I were watching it together. And then I just went down a David Lynch rabbit hole. Like it became an obsession. Like it clicked with me. I rewatched Mulholland Drive. I showed it to Sarah and was like, this is the best movie. And just went through all his movies and became really, really obsessed. And I think Mulholland Drive, it could be his best movie. I don't know if it's my favorite of his. It's definitely like when I say that, I don't mean to imply that I don't love it, because I absolutely love it, and it very, very well could be my favorite. But I'm partial to Blue Velvet. I think Eraserhead is a perfect film for what it's trying to do. But Mulholland Drive, I think, could be his best movie.
That makes me even more excited, because I've seen bits and pieces. I've caught glimpses. I went to theater school myself. And I had a director, one of my favorite directors working there. One of my favorite professors was very kind of Lynchian in his approach. I don't think he would have used the term himself. Maybe he would have. I don't know. But he's very dark and everything. We'd always kind of feel out scenes, and it would always be very impulsive. And the best thing about being in his shows was, no matter how big or small your part was, you always felt like a badass on stage. The visuals were always very striking too. And so that's what I kind of imagine it is to be like, what the feeling it is to be in a Lynch movie. You gotta feel cool. It feels cool to be in the movie, the poses you're striking, the mood that you're conveying, the atmosphere you're in. I got to imagine that kind of colors the entire experience. So even if you like don't understand what the heck is going on, which I'm sure also kind of happens in a David Lynch film, I got to imagine just being there is such a cool and affirming experience. You know, this is why we act. This is why we do it. That is what it's like to be in a David Lynch movie.
From what you've heard, from what I've heard from actors, like everyone loves him. Like these actors, they come back and they perform for him again, but like people sing his praises and they love, which is funny because David Lynch is such an unassuming character where you watch his movies and you're like, I don't know what to expect. And then you meet him and he's kind of, I know he's been described as like I can't remember. I think it was Mel Brooks who said he's kind of like James Stewart a little bit, like a old fashioned, like, wow, gee whiz. Like he is that kind of like very excitable and like, now Naomi, I want you in the scene. And he moves his hands around, his fingers around like this. You can't see it, but I'm doing it for Richie. He's very entranced by what I'm doing right now. But like, he's just this very nerdy, very lovable, but like, you know, his movies are so disturbing and his personality is just what an interesting contrast to that. But he's so brilliant. David Lynch is one of my favorite filmmakers, as everybody who has listened to any other episode of Missing Frames, I'm sure has heard me say. I've heard it. I feel like when I rewatched Mulholland Drive, this is going to be the third time I think I've seen it in my entire life. But the second time I watched it, it was just like in the midst of that revelation of just me loving him. And that movie was just, it feels like a perfect culmination of so much of what he'd done before. It's just one of those career defining movies where if you wanted to watch the perfect Lynch movie, Mulholland Drive is kind of doing a lot of the things he's done up to that point in his career. And this is, I think, 2001.
Well, that's what makes me more excited about it. I was already excited. It makes me more excited to hear you say that, because I feel like of the movies in his filmography, I don't hear people talk about that as much. Like Eraserhead is very much like him announcing he's here. He did Elephant Man, right?
He did Elephant Man,
and that's very much a film that was like very like a lot of a prestige release. Like a lot of, I feel like it was nominated for a lot of Oscars. I haven't done my research.
It was nominated for pretty much. I don't think it won a single Oscar, but it was nominated for many things. So it kind of was like it made him. Oh, now he's a quote unquote household name. Like now he's one of the big directors. Now people have to, you know, he's
everything George Lucas wanted to be. George Lucas wanted to be that experimental filmmaker. George Lucas could not tame the wild stallion that is David Lynch.
But yeah, no, then he, he did Dune, which was such a disaster. And then Blue Velvet was kind of his return to form in a way. And then I think Twin Peaks was after Blue Velvet.
Yes.
And Blue Velvet to me is almost like, I think, like I said, Blue Velvet's probably my favorite. And then Twin Peaks. And then this was his more, I don't know if you call it self-indulgent, but he did, I think you could point this out as a period where he sort of went off the rails with Fire Walk With Me, which I like, but I know people really hated it and some people still to this day hate it. Wild at Heart, which is probably my least favorite Lynch movie. That's Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern. And I'm sure people out there love it as well. It does have a great performance by Willem Dafoe. And then Lost Highway. Lost Highway was another one that felt like Lynch had kind of disappeared up his own ass in a way, where you have great filmmakers who kind of are auteurs. Some of them go through this period of like, they no longer, you're on their wavelength, and then you kind of lose the wavelength for a little bit, where it's like, he's off doing his own thing, but he's not necessarily.
But are there fans that still are like, even for those movies, they're like, they're pure, they still love them in spite of their flaws.
Yes. So, and then I think The Straight Story was next after Lost Highway, and The Straight Story is a G-rated Disney movie, and it's brilliant. It's amazing.
Really?
And then Mulholland Drive was after that, I believe. I think I got that right. But Mulholland Drive, of course, was like after The Straight Story, which is a very sweet, tender, very moving story. Mulholland Drive was kind of like, all right, and back to Lynch, but now he's kind of reasserted himself and found himself. And
that's interesting too, because I think I haven't really heard people. I don't hear people talk as much about Mulholland Drive. I remember it being nominated for a lot of awards at the time, and that was the same year as, was it the same Oscars as Fellowship of the Ring?
I think so.
Okay, I remember it being nominated a ton, but that makes me again more excited to watch it. because
Do you want to try to guess what it's about?
Yeah, sure.
You kind of know some things.
Yeah, so I think Naomi Watts is, this is all based on 20 years ago, what I may have gleaned from the DVD case. Maybe. Or the little preview clips that they show at the Oscars.
Right.
Naomi Watts lives in Los Angeles, just off of Mulholland Drive. She doesn't live on Mulholland Drive. There's something about Mulholland Drive that's calling to her. But every time she reaches the corner of the street, she's like, I can't look down there. There's just too much going on, too much power. There's a darkness on Mulholland Drive. But the thing is, she's a lesbian private detective. Not necessarily in that order, but I think that's just like what colors her character and her decisions.
Right. Okay.
And so she's got to go on the Mulholland Drive because there's a case. There's a real tough case that she's got to crack. And a tough cookie, a femme fatale, comes in and she's like, I need you to get to Mulholland Drive. And there's like crackling, sizzling chemistry between them. But Naomi Watts is like, no, I can't do it. I don't do Mulholland Drive. That's out of my jurisdiction. And this other femme fatale is like, oh, you'll do it all right for a sweet 10 grand buckarooski. And she drops a bunch of cash wads on Naomi Watts' desk. Oh, just on top of like an ashtray. Ash spills everywhere. Right. The blinds, light shines through the blinds, film noir style. And Naomi Watts turns away and she's like, I'll do it. And then Naomi Watts, that's the end.
That's the end of the movie.
That's the end of the movie.
She agrees to do it, and that's the end.
That's because I think and Lynch is all about the setup. He's not about the payoff. If we've learned anything from Twin Peaks, which I haven't seen, is that he prefers the journey. He doesn't prefer the climax, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Mind fart right there. Mind fart. So
I think you. At least one or two things you said are correct.
She is a private detective.
I'm not telling you which. I'm just saying some
female character.
Some of the things you described are correct, and many of the things you described are wrong.
Maybe we can make a drinking game out of this too. Like I'm gonna get like anytime Naomi Watts's American accent slips, then we drink.
We drink. Okay.
Anytime there is a long fleeting glance toward Mulholland Drive, like toward the sign or down the lane, we drink.
Okay.
Anytime a femme fatale walks in the room and is like, I told you not to go down Mulholland Drive. Damn it! I
don't think we're going to be that drunk at the end of this.
No, that's fine because I was going to suggest we drink bleach. There's a really add some stakes to it.
Great.
So as long as nothing is right, we will survive this viewing of Mulholland Drive.
It's great. All right, let's watch it and we'll be back and we'll find out just how right you were.
I can't wait.
Now available to own on video cassette.
And we're back. Richie, Mulholland Drive. I always, I say Mulholland, and I feel like I should be saying Mulholland because that is how you pronounce it. But
there's
I don't know why.
That's what's weird to me when I see it. I want to say Mulholland because there's an O right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it just rolls off the tongue. Mulholland.
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 It's a very guttural, like something that like an Uruk-hai would say. Mulholland.
What do you think of Mulholland Drive?
Better than the country Holland itself. I liked it. I didn't. Let me say this. Let me preface this. I've been thinking about it all day. I had to watch it in shifts because I was like, oh man, I got to get it done. I'm gonna watch it late, but I don't want to watch it tired. So I watched the first hour, and I enjoyed it. I watched the second hour, I enjoyed it, and I was like, I wonder where this is going, though. And then I watched the last 20 minutes separately, last half hour, really. And I was like, whoa, this really took a turn, and I like this chunk the most in context of everything I've seen before. And I think that actually kind of works, because I did look it up, and I saw that David Lynch had originally planned and had actually edited together a pilot that he wasn't happy with.
Yeah. And ABC didn't like it either.
And ABC didn't like it either.
ABC, like they were like, we don't like it, and he was like, well, the project's dead. And then he reimagined it. He had like a spark, and was like, oh, this could be a feature film, and was able to get funding, and they basically recreated it into
and made it into something
feature.
better, apparently. And it feels like I inadvertently watched it the way David Lynch intended it to be originally, and then changed his mind. So I liked it. I don't want to say I wanted more from it. I think it appealed to me. It probably hit all the buttons that David Lynch wanted to be pressed, or like as much as he could press with that movie for me. Meaning, I don't really feel the need to watch it probably more than a couple more times in my life. It's not like a favorite movie. It's not a movie that I think... it's not of his movies that I haven't seen. I feel like I'll like other content
other
of
ones
his
more.
Based on what I've read, what I've seen. So, like, you know, I hate to make that assumption, because I really enjoyed the atmosphere of it a ton. I thought the performances were great. Everything was weird and funny in ways that I think the director intended.
Yeah, David Lynch has this weird... Do you know Neil Breen, right? The filmmaker Neil Breen?
Yeah.
I've seen more than my fair share of Neil Breen movies. And when I watch Neil Breen, it occurs to me just how close, like, if David Lynch was any less brilliant, like, he could be making Neil Breen films.
Well, this movie especially, there's something about it that almost feels like it's it starts off, there's like a kind of sweetness that Naomi Watts Betty brings to the movie, and it's offset by the darkness of everything else. So like Betty kind of brings this very like mainstream movie vibe, and everybody else is bringing this kind of seedy late night Cinemax, like softcore, literally, so there's like a softcore scene in it. It feels like everybody else is like in a softcore porn. And David Lynch brings everything together in the middle. So it's in this weird middle place.
Yeah. I noticed that too watching it this time, is the first, because the David Lynch does this brilliantly. And not all of his movies do this, but this one, Blue Velvet, really, those are the movies I think about when I think of this particular vibe. What he does is, the movie is set up to be like somewhat sinister in the opening. It's like, oh, there's a car crash and this woman is walking around. It's kind of weird. And is she okay? She's bleeding. Does she have a concussion? Is she going to die? What's going on? So there's a mystery there. And it's weird. And there's some kind of creepy, unsettling imagery there. But then what David Lynch does, and he does a similar thing in Blue Velvet, where he kind of turns it into this sort of goofy, almost hokey, like charming little, like, oh, now it's like weird and funny, and this girl's coming in from the airport and hanging out with creepy old people.
It feels really
I
organic,
love the scene
though.
with the two of them in the car where they start, like, they're just smiling and hitting each other.
And then they leave, and that's it. Well, and then they come back. For a second, I was like, they come back at the end in part of the, I guess, dream sequence, unless the whole thing is a dream sequence. But what I was wondering, and I even wrote this in my notes, I was like, are they in the same town? A town car also owned by that crime syndicate? Like, are they about to get whacked? Like, is that the common thread? Yeah,
that would have been.
Yeah, just another car of teenagers out the skylight just speeds towards them.
That's what Hollywood's like, man. But like, yeah, David Lynch, like, you get set up into this, like, you're almost thinking, not that you're better than the movie, but, oh, this movie's not going to get to me because it's so goofy. And then Lynch just like blindsides you, and you're just like, what just happened? I guess
the turn, and this is the one thing I remember that I really remember from my first viewing, because I fell asleep through the
Winkies scene.
The Winkies scene leading to the homeless, like, Cloris Leachman covered in mud woman.
Yeah.
She looks like, I was like, is that Cloris Leachman? Because it should have been. Because he had Ann Miller in the movie. He had Lee Grant as like an old, like, witch in a hood.
Commit. Bring them all in.
So like, put everybody who was still alive in there. Yeah, I guess, like, to me overall though, and I hate to summarize it, but I guess we can get into the nitty gritty
Sure.
soon enough. But
Please.
overall, I was very surprised that it's like BBC thinks it's the best movie of the century.
I was going to ask you how you felt about that. Because remember, the last episode, the last real Missing Frames episode. Oh, no, not the last one. We did Black Christmas together.
No, but I know exactly where you're going with this.
But one-on-one, we did Vertigo.
Right, and I was going to bring that up 100%, that this is, to me, Mulholland Drive in David Lynch's catalog, to me, is also how I view Vertigo in Alfred Hitchcock's catalog. And I can't really say that because I haven't.
I was going to say without seeing any of David Lynch's.
I know, I'm just jumping ahead, but it's just the reaction to it. I can almost predict because I appreciate Vertigo for all that it offers, and it's such a hypnotic mood setter. But I love so many other Hitchcock movies more. I will take North by Northwest. I will take the second Man Who Knew Too Much over Vertigo.
Even Psycho.
Oh, I love Psycho. And yes, I would take Psycho. Maybe not The Birds, but I like The Birds a lot too. This movie, to me, Mulholland Drive, was more like a song. It was a mood. It was a vibe. It was a feeling. I would put it on in the background of a party, but I don't know if I would sit everybody else down and say, shut up and watch this. It's like, it's like just music to color the mood, set the scene. And Vertigo, in a way, is like so much like the same song, like the same very deep, dark strings being plucked over, like this unsettling feeling that's starting to kind of set in and creep in. That was how I feel about Mulholland Drive. And and it really, for me, it didn't really pick up until the end, because it did kind of feel like he was just kind of like riffing, like doing jazz riffs in a screenplay, just kind of improvising his way through until the ending for me.
I wonder how much of that has to do with the fact that I don't know. I try to figure out okay, I think this was the pilot. I think the mystery stuff was the pilot, the two girls. But I think he brought in Justin Theroux, I think, was part of that, though. Part of me wonders if it's disjointed. But also, I love this movie so much. So I don't... that's David Lynch to me. David Lynch, I love that you describe it as a song. There are lots of people who want to interpret David Lynch movies, and David Lynch has always adamantly refused to give any interpretation or to acknowledge whether someone's interpretation of the films he makes are accurate, because for him, the viewer is the participant and each viewer is unique, and whatever that viewer takes away from his film is a unique and special thing, which
I really appreciate.
He doesn't want to touch on. He's like, no, it's each viewer is having their own independent reaction to this film. In terms of music, for me personally, trying to explain a David Lynch film or trying to dissect it is like trying to explain why, I don't know, why Let It Be is such an amazing song. Like, oh, well, when Paul sings about Mother Mary, you see, this is, but it's I listen to it and I understand it. We all understand it. And if you try to explain it, you're pulling something down to earth that was never meant to be pulled down to earth. He
doesn't explain it in the movie. It's a mystery movie about the experience of being in a mystery. You're in the mystery in this movie. It's not about the solution, because there is none. There's never,
and that's, I'll warn you, you don't ever expect solutions in David Lynch movies. Obviously, there are exceptions, but especially, Eraserhead and Twin Peaks and things like that. You'll be very, very upset if you go into those expecting clean-cut solutions. Mulholland Drive, I don't know that I would agree that Lynch is just jazz riffing with Mulholland Drive. I think there's actually an expressed thing he's trying to say.
Do you think though that because it's very surreal, I'm sure he either pre-planned or later, while he was making the movie, was able to ascribe certain movements or parts of, or scenes or sequences or characters to certain actual concrete feelings and beliefs that he had and wanted to express when going into this movie. But do you think that he kind of defined everything beforehand, or he kind of figured it out as he went along? Because some of it to me seems like he did figure it out.
I think Lynch, he's really into transcendental meditation. which I can't say that I've experienced for myself, but I think
Him and Jerry Seinfeld.
he's actually tapped into something, and the truths he touches on are why his movies work so well. Why it's not just like I've seen people try to do the Lynch thing and it not work,
Right.
or it's just weird for the sake of weird, and it's like, this is stupid. Lynch, I think the reason his films resonate and why people love him so much is because he's tapped into something sincere. And I do believe, like, at some points, I don't think he quite knows what he's saying.
Right.
But he has an understanding of what, like, just on a gut level, he's like, no, I know this is important. I know I got to get it in the movie. But like I said, I don't like to read too much into it. I don't like to see it interpreted. I don't want someone to tell me necessarily what it's about. But I have seen some really great interpretations of Mulholland Drive that I believe, like, some of them you're like, oh, I don't think that was meaningful. I don't think the director meant for that. I believe that David Lynch did that. Like, I believe that he to some extent, it's not just random nonsense. It's like there's a purpose for everything and he knows what it is. Now, there are movies of his where, like Lost Highway or maybe Wild at Heart, where I feel like that's a little more David Lynch flailing. Mulholland Drive, though, I watch and I'm like, I don't claim to understand it, but I appreciate, and I think the whole thing to me is not even so much about the mystery as it is about, like, Hollywood and LA and like the glamour of what that life could be. But
it's
what
all
the
about
reality
glamour
of it is.
and nostalgia mixed with, like, this, like you just were about to say, the seedy reality of everything.
Yeah. Which is something else he likes to do a lot. That's in Blue Velvet as well. But I do believe that it's not just random. Like, I think there is a purpose behind it. I can't remember the name of the video. I might send it to you afterwards, but I'm going to tell everybody once I find it. There's this guy, he did I think a 4 to 5 hour analysis of Twin Peaks, the entire thing. And I haven't watched it just because that's so exhaustive. But he did an hour-long video called The Terrible Secret of Mulholland Drive. This is Twin Perfect is the name of the channel, where he breaks down everything in a way that is so, like, oh my God, this is insane. I watched it once, like, a few months ago. My friend TC Paget, who's been on the show, sent it to me. I watched it once and it so utterly explains the movie, like, in such like minute detail that it feels like, oh my God, yeah, that's what the movie's about. Like, this is what it means.
Do you think it answered for you what you were looking for?
Yeah, well, it's so good that I've never watched it again because I prefer to not know explicitly what the movie is trying to say. And I don't know that it's like, again, I line up with Lynch where it's like, it means what you want it to mean, and there might not be any definitive meaning to it. I think he knows what he's trying to say.
I think what's amazing, though, is the actors don't, and they still seem like they're conveying a very clear story, even when we don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, he manages to get, like, truthful, great.
Yes.
I think that's why it's not Neil Breen. I think that's why. I mean, Lynch is a much.
I think he's a much more talented person. He's somebody.
Yeah, he's a much more talented filmmaker.
People and how humanity works, brains work, people interrelate with each other. He's able to convey that on screen.
Yes,
almost in, like, a Dali-esque way, like Salvador Dali, where he's, like, able to kind of find a way to appeal to you with images that are both beautiful and grotesque. And they're both very surrealist in their own medium. It's well, I guess this is defined as, like, a surrealist neo-noir, and it is that.
But I think, like, if you want an explanation, that video is about as good as you're going to get. And I think the dude is on point. But for me personally, I watch it and it's like you said, it's a song. It washes over me. I don't understand it. I just feel it. And I know, and it taps into something personal for me where I'm like, I'm connecting to whatever this is. This is tapped into something. But I was also thinking watching it, like, it's one of those things where I'm not surprised that my initial reactions to David Lynch were kind of like, am I supposed to take this seriously? What am I supposed to be doing? Is this, because he does, like, almost encourage some of his actors who are less professional than the professionals to not ham it up, but to be a little bit more stiff and awkward, and it ends up being very funny. But it's also like, I could see somebody watching it and being like, is this supposed to be
Are they
good?
supposed to be good actors? Because
Yeah.
they're not trained. They're raw, which I think
Yeah.
is what he's going for. And especially like the scene where the hitman is like going through the office. It's so insane and great. Because that for me is like, I don't know, when I've directed stage theatrical productions in the past and I'm casting, and I kind of learned this from not necessarily David Lynch, but from like, and I know he's on the opposite end of the spectrum, but like Judd Apatow movies where he'll cast people based on the energy they bring and like just authenticity over like training.
Yeah, training or even talent.
Right. And you don't want to do that for like Shakespeare necessarily, although, you know, if you have a concept that works, maybe you can make it work. But with this, because it's very much like his own style, it works. And there's something about Lynch that almost feels a little Tarantino-esque too. Only their writing styles are different, but they write very much for themselves.
Yeah.
And they naturally know how to direct their own work, which not everybody does, surprisingly.
Well, they have a really like vast, intimate understanding of cinema, and how to express themselves through cinema. And to them, they're like, I don't care what you tell me. I don't care what the rules are.
Yeah.
I know this medium inside and out. It's so personal, and so I'm so tuned into it that I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to make a scene the way you tell me to make a scene. I can do whatever I want to do with this.
Right.
Lynch is also not a cocky son of a bitch. And I love Tarantino, but I think I would probably rather hang out with David Lynch than Tarantino.
Look, I'll hang out with either. If one of them comes to call in.
Let's be real. Can we get all three of us
Let's
in
get
the room?
all three of us.
I do get that. I get that vibe.
And I think also Tarantino probably he'll make weird casting choices based on movies he's loved. And I'm sure David Lynch does that too. But David Lynch, I think, comes at it from like a more human angle of just like, who is the best person or personality to convey this emotion that I've written into this scene? And it just needs to be like the emotion itself.
A yelling
needs to be as
woman.
Clear. Yeah. And that was like they're flailing around each other.
It's just so good. It's
great.
so good.
Because they're fully committed to just the game of struggle against each other. Make it as difficult for the other person to do what they're trying to do. He's trying to kill you, make it really difficult for him, get in his face, and it works. And there are times when it does feel like an acting exercise. So like the braless woman in the sweatshirt who's following him.
Yes.
And she's following the blonde hitman in the parking lot. I think it's outside of the diner at that point. Or I forget where it is. But like I watch her performance and I'm like, it reminds me of an acting exercise that you'd tell somebody like in a theater school or in, even if you're like directing somebody, like we're just gonna do exercise, we're just gonna do a warm up. Everybody fill the space, just start like walking around, find empty space, interact with people when you see them, make eye contact, breathe them in, and then keep walking. And now what I want you to do is as you're walking, find as neutral a stance as possible, and then start to lead with your knees or pick a body part to lead with your nose. Your nose is the furthest point out of your body. And that's going to inform your character. And that's kind of how you maybe would build like a character with younger actors. And I'm assuming he just told her, lead with your chest. I want you to lead with your chest. Just lead with your chest in this scene. And that's the only direction I'm going to give you. And see how that informs your character. And then she's literally perky, and that made her character perky, and that was it.
Yeah.
It seems like, I'm sure that didn't happen, but maybe it did.
There's I think there's a lot of stuff that he does where it is probably that. Like it's like, am I doing? You're great. Just stick it out like that and strut your stuff.
Strut your stuff, Missy.
Yeah, but I think, I don't know. There's something about it that's so funny and so inherent to it, and then becomes so odd in terms of tone when you start to get pulled into these nightmarish areas where it's like, what happened? Like, I was laughing 1 second. Now I'm kind of terrified and disturbed. And I don't know that anyone does that better than Lynch, but it is amazing to me, the level of like how he can push those things. Cause I can see how in another movie or in another director's hands, I would be so like, what is this?
Yeah.
What's going on? I don't necessarily feel that way with Lynch. But
well, sometimes, I mean, a lot of times other directors are actually trying to make a standard good movie.
yes.
And David Lynch is trying to make what you saw. And I think that's kind of the difference between someone like him and Neil Breen. So I feel like Neil Breen is probably trying to make a better movie.
I think
no
you're right.
offense to Neil Breen.
Well, yeah, it's
but,
very clearly something that he's intending.
Yeah.
But it almost like lulls you into this sense of false security. Like that's how a good number of his works feel to me.
Yeah.
Is it's like, oh, it's funny and it's goofy and I've got the upper hand, and that's how it becomes more powerful and weird, and it almost plays into the dreamlike quality of once it goes beyond the realm of understanding and coherence into something else. And then suddenly these characters who are weird and like stiff and awkward become a part of this tapestry of like this not quite reality. Well, yeah, like the cowboy who I love so much.
Yeah, he came back really quick towards the end. Like he just walked past, and Betty, who is later Diane, she catches a glimpse of him, the psychic cowboy, and then but then doesn't see him again.
I don't remember. He said, "You'll see me once if you did well, but you'll see me twice if you didn't do well." And I don't remember a third time, but that was, I assumed her seeing him meant that we, the audience, it's like, oh, we've seen him twice, so
we haven't.
Justin Theroux didn't make the right decision. No. What was the right decision? I don't know.
But wait a second, though, too, because in Betty's world, he's casting the movie, and in Diane's world, which could be a set before, because Diane is in theory quote unquote dead, they've seen her dead,
right,
but she had already made that movie with Camilla. That was what she had auditioned for the role of, unless I misheard it totally and I'm totally off. It was like the Sylvia Miles story, Sylvia something story, I don't even remember. So like the timing is all weird on purpose.
Yes.
Unless that's just something the names, I misheard the names.
It is this weird instance of like, the more I try to explain it or the more anyone tries to explain it to me, I'm like, I don't really care. I don't care. Like it doesn't, like, I didn't watch, when I watched Mulholland Drive for the second time, which was just a few years ago when I was really going through my Lynch kick. It just hit me. Like, I was like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care what it's about. Like, I just understand the tone and the mood and the power of cinema through this film. Right. Like, I don't like, it's funny and it's quirky and it's cute at the beginning, and then it becomes weird and disturbing and strange as this relationship and this love story develops, and then it just becomes outright nightmarish when they go to this Club Silencio and they're watching performances.
Yeah, that, is like a what is that? Like a pop-up, like it's like Hamunaptra. It's like the city from The Mummy that just appears at sunset on the third day. It's
I don't know.
Weird. It's like a low-rent Spanish language talent show that only appears at 2 a.m. on Thursday nights when you need it most.
I don't know what it is, but it's so stunning and powerful to me that if that had been all the movie had to offer, I still would have been like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. But like, I don't know if it's because like I have such a fascination with like surreal and dream logic and things like that. But to me, when I watch something like that with the music and the strangeness of it and the whole, like, this is all an illusion, and the woman coming out and singing, and then like just the women watching and crying, there's something so powerful about the visuals and the music. And again, it's so cinematic, and the emotional connection the film is able to make with me, the viewer, through those moments that are like, it doesn't make sense, but I'm pulled completely into it. And I'm so entranced and engaged and hypnotized by it that it transcends like reality. It becomes cinema. It becomes something more. It becomes powerful and an artistic statement and something that I can't explain. Other than like, I would never explain. You can't explain why a song is good to somebody. You just have to play the song for them. And that to me is like that moment. Really all of Lynch's movies are like that, where it's like, I can't explain it. You're experiencing it and you're kind of overwhelmed by whatever this is. I think because he taps into something sincere and genuine. Like, prefacing that is the love scene between the two of them. Which is weird and a little voyeuristic, but also like very touching in a way, like very moving. Like I find it very moving, their love for each other, even though it's like, is she a real person? Is she saying I'm in love with you? Like this is the person she wants to be, like she's
that's what I thought.
projection.
It felt very lusty to me. I was seeing on Wikipedia, which is I guess not the most ideal source, but when you don't have a lot of time, you go to where they summarize everything for you. And so I was seeing that some reviewers and culture critics were saying, this was one of the most appealing romances of the early 21st century on screen. And I get there's something about it that's like not just erotic, that there's like a deep connection between these characters. But I don't know, it didn't really go beyond lust for me, or like the early stages of a relationship with the Betty and Rita setting. And so you really only see like the start of a relationship, and then at the end you see the end of the relationship when it flashes to Diane and Camilla's version.
But we're not even seeing, the thing is, I hate getting hung up on this because I don't like to try to explain it, but like I don't think we're seeing a real relationship between two people. Like when we see them at the end of the movie, I don't think we saw part one of their relationship. I think what we're doing is we're inside Naomi Watts' head, and these are the final moments she's experiencing right as she's killed herself, is how I see it. Like it's like
interesting.
she had she came to Hollywood wanting to live like everything is true. Like she came to Hollywood, she won a jitterbug contest, and the film.
But is she really Canadian?
She's not Canadian.
We don't hear her say a boot.
She's not Canadian.
She never eats anything with maple syrup. I don't believe it.
That's the secret. So I feel like everything is true, but it becomes an idealized like dream, like oh wow, it's such a magical everything. She like tells I guess it's Rita. I can't remember her name or what her real name is.
Camilla.
Laura Herring.
Yeah.
Rita
Camilla. I thought she was from the poster, and then I saw that the movie started and it was somebody different. I thought it was Linda Fiorentino from Men in Black. And then I was like, oh, she's different. But Linda Fiorentino is great.
Betty tells her, she's like, oh, I'm like, I got off the plane and I'm in this dream place. And it's like, I think this entire sequence is her dream, and what happens is
the jitterbug competition is not the dream, because that's filmed very dreamlike. It looks like a late 90s Gap commercial.
Well, everything
that goes nowhere.
Everything up until like I feel like everything up until Club Silencio, when she disappears into the blue box, and then Rita disappears into the blue box, and then it becomes reality. And part of me is like, is blue box like they've passed on? Like, has she finally died? Is that what it? Again, explaining it doesn't really feel as interesting to me as watching it and experiencing it. Like, I don't like saying like, oh well, I think she's dead the whole time and she's experiencing this.
I mean, if it's a dream, everything that happens in a dream, that when you wake up from a dream and you're recounting the dream, no matter where you go or what you see, everything that you're recounting is categorized in your head as part of that dream. So this movie, to me, everything that happens in it could be real, could be true, so I accept it as it is. I'll say this too, randomly. Dumbledore says to Harry in book 7, or Harry says to Dumbledore, could this all be happening in my head? And Dumbledore says, will you correct me if I'm wrong? Dumbledore basically says, does that make it any less true? Or does that mean it matters any less? And to me, that's kind of what this is what David Lynch is presenting to us. What does it matter what's real and what's not? These characters seem like they're experiencing real emotions.
Right.
And that's enough for me.
Yeah.
But I didn't love the movie. And I don't know if I actually really did truly love this movie, but I liked it fine. It went by fast, surprisingly so, because I feel like
considering it's 2.5 hours.
Considering it's 2.5 hours, and the first 2 hours, to me, when I was watching it, kind of felt like David Lynch was, I don't want to say he's treading water, but he's like, to me, it feels like he's figuring it out as he goes. And then the idea hits him as he's writing it of how to present the other angle. And then it comes in hot, quick. The transition happens fast, and it takes you a second. I was watching it thinking like, oh, I guess we flashed forward. Or like, I guess Betty moved into a new apartment, not realizing at first that it's Diane's apartment and she's Diane. And that's when the movie really picked up for me, was was then. I liked it fine. I really liked it the last 20 minutes, last half hour when it transitioned.
You know, it's almost not the opposite for me. Like I love all of it, but to
Yeah.
me, the more interesting stuff is everything before that. Like once it gets into there, it turns into like, oh, everything you thought you knew is not true.
But
And then it's
to your point though, you need the first 2 hours for the last 20 minutes to matter.
Yeah, well, yes, like it all matters, and the last 20 minutes to me is just like you watch the dissolution of this woman, and it's like, oh my god, this is insane. This is very painful to watch. To me, the first 2 hours of like that idealized, like, oh, it's all magic, and all the kooky stuff with like Hollywood, and this is the girl, and like the scene in the conference room where Angelo Bartolomenti, who is the composer of this and Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, is screaming and spitting out his espresso, and he's screaming coffee.
That's what I imagine like a Disney casting session to be. Like it's that heartless.
But I love all of that stuff so much,
like
just because it's so
a waiter
awkward.
in a red blazer awkwardly stammering over them with the wrong espresso.
Yeah,
Kathy
but to me,
Kennedy's
most like the final 20 minutes are the most concrete and set, not necessarily fully in reality.
Mm-hmm.
But like, and of course, the end where she goes nuts and old people are terrorizing her.
Oh, great! I love it. Irene and her husband. They survive the town car. They crawl out of a paper bag that Cloris Leachman has at her feet with the box in it.
Right. The movie becomes more concrete and in reality, and it's like, oh, it leads to her suicide, which to me kicks off the rest of the film, like the first 2 hours of the film. Like it's all in her head, because then it's like. It shows like the her being happy, and then Rita shows up and they're happy together.
You kind of got to think, really it is very cyclical in that way, because the opening of the movie is heavy panting, going face first. We're like in somebody's point of view. The camera is point of view shot that goes face first into a pillow. And I wanted to go back and check, what are the colors of the sheets?
Right. They're red. I think
they're like purplish red, magenta, whatever. Yeah, they're like close to that.
But like, I think that's why the finale isn't as not as interesting to me. It's fascinating because it starts to put things into context and makes everything else more interesting.
Well, for me, it's where it all comes together, because I feel like the first 2 hours are a long, leisurely table setting for something. We have no idea what, and ultimately, it really doesn't matter what. It really, we're waiting for 2 hours for David Lynch to make a decision, and he makes the really that's it. And he makes the decision to flash into the Diane Camilla story. And I actually thought, when I was watching it the first time, I didn't think there was this weird like dreamlike connection. My first thought was like, I feel like David Lynch wants them to be two separate people who just happen to look alike. And I see that's been an interpretation of it online. I was happy when he made a decision for where to go. That was when I was like, okay, great. I don't care what happens as long as something big happens, and that was something big.
I think that's the difference. Is I never felt like I was wondering where he's going with this. Like I was just along for the ride. Like I never felt like I don't know where this is going. And again, I don't remember distinctly what my first reaction to any David Lynch movie was. Just, I don't understand this, and I am confused. And that was Eraserhead and Mulholland Drive. Like I was just kind of like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I like it. And the second time I watched Mulholland Drive, I was like, well, this is like, it's a dream. It's a dream, and I don't have to understand it. I just feel it. And so to me, I was so completely embracing that style and that feeling that watching it, I was just completely along for the ride and never thinking like, where is he going to ultimately go with this? It was, I don't care where he goes with this. I love him. And that's probably the difference in it's the difference in reaction, because, I'm a David Lynch fan, and you're just kind of taking your first steps into a larger world. And I love David Lynch. So I'm like, great maestro, show me whatever it is. I believe you're taking me somewhere special. He doesn't always, like, I do think, and I've only seen them once, so maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'll end up loving them more. But like the only movies of his I've seen that I haven't loved are Wild at Heart and Lost Highway, which I just felt like maybe kind of how you're reacting to Mulholland Drive. I felt that for both of them, where I was like,
apparently Roger Ebert really didn't like most of his stuff and then loved Mulholland Drive.
Roger Ebert, I think, was real.
Interesting.
I think he kept trying to like pin it down, but he in general, I think, was saying like, but what is it like? Why did this happen? What did this like? This needed to, and like, but then I think Mulholland Drive, like 20 years, however many years, almost 30 years, I guess, into David Lynch's career, Ebert had just finally surrendered and been like, okay, I finally get it. And that was his admission of understanding Lynch. Because frankly, I don't think Ebert, his interpretations of like films like Blue Velvet, he gets very disturbed by certain elements of Blue Velvet and misinterprets, I think, what Lynch is going for. And so I think it was just a career in which Ebert constantly misunderstood Lynch and then finally surrendered to who Lynch was as a filmmaker and was like, all right, 4 stars. I get it now.
Well, I mean, it was much beloved by much of the critical community. I don't have a problem with David Lynch not offering concrete answers to things. I actually appreciate that. And I did expect that going in based on what I've heard about most of his other stuff. That wasn't necessarily a problem to me. I think with this movie, for me, I didn't expect it to take so long, like to really just let the Betty Rita relationship marinate and interspliced with like moments with a hitman, interspliced with what's his face's story.
Right.
I want to call him Justin Trudeau.
Justin Theroux.
Justin Theroux's story. It just seemed, I don't know. I think I was just expecting more from that.
Well, to your point, it is kind of not leisurely, but it is the sense of like, in general, a conventional film sets these stories up to go somewhere.
Right.
And Lynch is not. It's more.
I
about,
don't
like,
think I was getting enough new material from.
Yeah,
like you know what I mean. And that's why
Yeah,
it feels more like a song to me, where it's like I feel like I'm getting the same chorus over and over again. It's just like it's a little more intense. There's another instrument added to the same chorus, as opposed to like some kind of like confluence of storylines, or it was very much like I feel like we kept returning to the same emotional place, peppered with really interesting scenes. The Naomi Watts scene where she is, where Betty is auditioning, is great with James Cameron from Poltergeist, or James Caron from Poltergeist. I
didn't even notice that.
He moved the tombstones, but he didn't move the bodies. No! You moved the headstones, but you didn't move the bodies, didn't you?
Maybe this is his nightmare, his character's nightmare from Poltergeist.
He's that character.
As a result of that. Yeah, I loved the. I mean, I think Naomi Watts. I mean, the main performers are incredible, but I think Naomi Watts is like,
she's amazing.
This was I think her first feature too. Like, this is the movie that made her a star. Like, before this, she was about to quit acting and like move out of Hollywood, and then she happened to get Mulholland Drive.
And she also, I have to say, I hate to, I don't like to on accent work because I'm not the greatest person at accents either. But I feel like there's a lot of British actors. And she's Australian. Australians, I feel like, are a little better in the famous ones, a little better at doing an American accent.
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman's great. Nicole Kidman's pretty good too.
She's good, yeah.
But you know what? There's some British actors who are great too. But a lot of times when a British actor does an American accent, it's like, I'm an American, and listen to me, boys. I'm an American, and I've worked really hard with my accent coach on getting this right. So listen up. And she's highly emotional. She's screaming, she's yelling, she's changing her vocal pitch and timbre. And she always sounds like kind of a calm, cool, like she just sounds like a sweet girl from Canada.
Right.
So, and emotionally, her emotional range is
Well, it's the difference
great.
between, I think maybe there's something here too, because there's the scene where she performs, like she's, rehearsing for her audition with Rita, and it's great because they're both like almost as hammy and stiff in their delivery as some of the performances in the film.
Well, and the first shot, I thought that they were having a real conversation until you see the script,
which I think is the intention. And then it's like everything is a little bit more staged, but then when she comes in and performs it for real in the audition, it's like don't the director who's like distracted and yes, don't make it real until it feels real. And they're like, okay. And then he's not, they have to nudge him to say action, which I imagine is similar to what George Lucas was like. action. But that scene is so like powerful and stunning, and you're so like entranced by it. I feel like there's something in that scene and the contrast between her rehearsing it and her performing it in that room, that maybe there's the movie has so much about duality, and there are two women, and like there's the before and there's the after, where it's like, is this reality? What is this? But like, I wonder what the interpretation of that is with this very intensely emotionally real performance of the scene compared to like the very fake phony. And it's like, that's around the point where the movie starts to shift into more reality too. Maybe I'm wrong, but like that feels like a pretty big landmark, because it's the first time we've seen Betty, like she's very and very bright.
Yeah.
And then that's the first time we've seen her feel emotionally like, oh, she's got something, she's got depth, and there's something more, and there's a pain there, and there's an emotion there. And it makes me wonder, but that's all outside the performance itself, which is just stunning and insane. And I watched that scene, and it's like, it's literally breathtaking to me.
She generally plays the Betty character very even keeled until she's got the performance. She's convulsing at the like Silencio theater. And then at the end, when she's Diane, she's pretty, she's got like this very,
right.
She's
grungy.
Grungy, but also like she's holding, the emotions are very close to the surface throughout that entire sequence.
That's one of my favorite moments. I think Club Silencio is probably my favorite scene in the movie, but I like the two of them sneaking around and trying to find answers and doing detective work. And it's a little bit of a red herring, because then it's like ultimately the mystery doesn't mean anything.
Right.
I love the quote unquote like behind the scenes production stuff where
what an expensive camera test that they had going on, where they just had all the actors
audition
lip syncing. Yeah, lip syncing to like a 1960s kind of like pop song.
Right.
In full costume. Their only acting is behind a window in a recording studio.
There's no logic to it.
There's no logic to it, but it feeds into the nostalgia element that I think he's really pumping.
And in. I think ultimately,
like oxygen in a casino, he's pumping that nostalgia into this movie.
Well, I think it is. I think the movie is supposed to be like this nostalgic, but also kind of harsh criticism of Hollywood. It's like nostalgically looking at like, oh, film is wonderful and magical and it's beautiful, going to LA and pursuing your dream, but also like the harsh, gross underbelly and reality of what LA and making movies is really like.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm very, very into it. Like but I think you and some other friends of mine, I John Mills, who's been on the show and is also on the Nerd Party, I don't think he loves this movie. And I don't know, it feels in some ways like I think Lynch has done this better. Like I think Blue Velvet is a better film. Blue Velvet is also like, Mulholland Drive is more dreamlike, and Blue Velvet is more of a coherent, straightforward story. Right. Like it's just like it does follow like characters from beginning to end in a coherent fashion. Like the Mulholland Drive feels like the perfect, like it's like a Lynch greatest hits. There's a lot of like, there's the dreamlike stuff, there's the hokey humor and acting, there's like the really nightmarish, intense stuff. There's red curtains from Twin Peaks. So it's like there's a lot in Mulholland Drive that feels like this is a perfect expression of who Lynch is. Like it is an encapsulation of a lot of what Lynch has to offer, and I love it so much. Like it's hard to disconnect from that love of it. Like I go along with it. I go along for the ride, and I'm really into it. And I vibe at this point in my life. I vibe so much with David Lynch and what he's going for, that it's almost like I've been kind of stuttering and like, I kind of get what you're saying, but like to me, I'm like so tapped into it that I'm like, even when I try to defend it and try to explain things, it's like, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to explain anything about this movie. I don't want to understand it. I don't want to justify decisions creatively. Like when trying to defend it is almost impossible to me, because then I have to explain why I think Lynch made those choices, and I don't want to understand why he made those choices. There's a magic to life in general that I don't necessarily need to understand. Like, what's the meaning of it all? What does it all mean? It's like, I don't know. The meaning is like the attempt to understand, not the understanding. So it's hard to put my finger on exactly what it is, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you're like, it's like a song, it's like a mood. That to me is what resonates with Mulholland Drive, where incoherence is like the name of the game. And it's not even as incoherent as some other stuff Lynch has done, but it is so all-encompassing and so confident in its vision.
Yeah. He has it in him to do whatever he wants. And Mulholland Drive is the movie he wanted to make. And I feel like if another filmmaker was directing Mulholland Drive and made a lot of similar choices, but maybe didn't have as much of the finesse and confidence in their own, I guess, style, it would have been decried as self-indulgent. But because David Lynch did it, and he's a very empathetic person, he seems like somebody who kind of can tap into, like you said, this kind of nerve, this feeling, this vibe that the general audience might be feeling when presented with like a palette of ideas of the feeling and the vibe of Los Angeles at the turn of the 21st century.
Right.
That fits. That's fine, and we are willing to accept it, and I accept it. I like it. I'm going to compare it real quick to a movie that is I don't think is as good and is going to feel very odd at first when I bring it up, but I feel
I'm ready.
a weird similarity between this and Funny People, if only because Funny People had two decent movies. It was two separate ideas connected by the Adam Sandler character. It was a guy trying to get back what he lost, trying to get back into comedy, and then a comedian established who has cancer and trying or a sickness, I think. I don't remember exactly what it is, but he's trying to almost give himself an intervention and figure out where he went wrong and make right what he failed at during his healthy portion of life.
Right.
And both versions would be a compelling story with the same cast, probably most of the same footage you could use, and have an hour 20 to an hour 35 minute movie that works. But you have a 2.5 hour movie that doesn't. With Mulholland Drive, you have a 2.5 hour movie that works very well. For me, I think it might have been a little bit better if he went stronger in one direction over the other. And for me, I feel like it might have just meant like cutting off one of those choruses or beefing up an earlier chorus. Like when I say chorus, I'm talking about like heightening of a mood that like kind of waves, the peaks of those waves. We see a similar emotional moment repeated throughout. If he either give us a little bit less emotional moments that kept repeating earlier in the movie and maybe heightened them towards the midpoint of the movie, it would have been a little bit more conventional. But I think for me, it would have the ending might have packed an even stronger punch, and the beginning might have felt a little less, I don't want to say monotonous, because it's very perky and bubbly and there's a lot of interesting scenes and characters and stuff.
Right.
I think the movie itself would have had a stronger impact on me. I know that's not the movie David Lynch wanted to make, but that's kind of just where I'm coming at it in my Lynchian life cycle that I'm in right now.
Yeah, Lost Highway, I don't want to say too much about Lost Highway in case anyone listening hasn't seen it, or in case you want to watch it at some point. Again, that's not the first Lynch movie I would recommend, and not the second, third, or fourth either. But Lost Highway, I saw Lost Highway after Mulholland Drive, and Lost Highway is, that was 98, I think, 97 or 98. So it precedes Mulholland Drive. And I feel like there are ideas Lynch is trying to get across in Lost Highway that are very similar, and he does a similar shifting thing with you think it's one thing, but it's actually something else. And the twist comes a little bit earlier in the film. And to me, it feels less interesting. And part of me feels like Mulholland Drive perfected that. But
he learned from that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't because you're bringing up great points and you're not wrong at all. And it's hard to say because
you have I would love to revisit this movie with you after having watched all of his other stuff to see where I land.
Well, that's what I think is partly what's feeding. When I saw this and connected so strongly with it, I was at a point where like I said, the first time I watched it, I was not I don't know who David Lynch is. I was not remotely ready for any of that. But then the second time I watched it, I was like, this is clicking so tremendously that when I look at that BBC poll, I'm like, oh sure, Mulholland Drive, the greatest film of the. I don't agree. I don't think it is. I would never list it as that. But I am perfectly fine with it being declared the best film of the 21st century thus far.
Yeah.
Does it feel a little like elitist to say that? Yeah, probably. I think like I said, I think there are better films that have been made, but I think it definitely deserves to be in that wheelhouse. And I think, I don't know. I don't know what else is there to say. What else do we have to say?
I don't know, man. I have so many notes, but it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
I
don't know how
we
to
already
weed,
did
weed
it. We
through
did
this.
it.
I don't know how to weed through this stuff. You know what? This is what I thought. This was my Matrix connection. Was I felt like this movie is like the Matrix from the perspective of characters who only took the blue pill and didn't look back. The world is weird, nothing makes sense, but they don't know it's weird and they don't know it makes sense. They're just living in it and they're going with whatever weird deja vu, odd like glitches in the Matrix keep coming their way, and they don't notice the glitches.
I think that's a great way to end the episode.
Oh, great.
And I want to leave you with this. So David Lynch, so apparently when it was released on DVD, I don't remember who asked him to do this, but somebody said, can you just put some like clues in the DVD? Like put like just something we can include in the DVD insert that will hint the and Lynch is like, I don't want to tell anybody what it's about. And they're like, just give them a little bit of hints. So these are David Lynch's it's titled David Lynch's 10 Clues to Unlocking This Thriller. And I'll leave you with this so that you can try to reinterpret it and come back and rewatch it someday. Right. So the clues are, I'm going to read it as David Lynch. 1, pay particular attention in the beginning of the film. At least 2 clues are revealed before the credits. 2, notice appearances of the red lampshade. I'm realizing I should have read this to you before, probably.
Yeah. Well, you 3, didn't need to because I accurately predicted everything that happened in this movie.
You did it.
Lesbian
3,
private eyes.
Can you hear the title of the film that Adam Kesher is auditioning actresses for? Is it mentioned again?
Yes, I caught that.
4, an accident is a terrible event. Notice the location of the accident.
It was the same place that she got out. No, it wasn't the same place.
Oh my God. 5, who gives a key and why? 6, notice the robe, the ashtray, the coffee cup. 7, what is felt, realized, and gathered at the Club Silencio? 8, did talent alone help Camilla? 9, note the occurrences surrounding the man behind Winkies. 10, where is Aunt Ruth?
She's not. She was dead. She went somewhere. Dead? She went somewhere to film. Didn't she go up north or something like that?
I don't know.
She may have gone to Canada to film.
We don't know where she was. Where was she?
And then she died. Although here's something. When I was watching the movie, I was like, Rita, before she takes on the name Rita, she looks kind of like Rita Hayworth, and she is of Spanish descent, and she is of Mexican descent, and Rita Hayworth is of Spanish descent, and they both are actresses. It just seems there's a connection there. Anyway, she goes into the apartment as the aunt is moving out, but the aunt comes back in for her keys. Keys? Is that connected to what David Lynch was saying? Anyway, the aunt comes in for the keys, and the keys are on the table over which Rita is hiding, but a lot of things have been moved from the house. I just don't understand. How did the aunt not see Rita hiding under the table in full light, in full view of our camera so we could easily see her under the table?
And on that note, what are our final ratings? What do we, how many Winkies do you give Mulholland Drive?
Out of, what are 5?
5. 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest.
I give it 4.
4, okay. I'll give it 5. Oh. I felt like you liked it less based on what you were telling me.
No, I would have probably given it 3 to 3.5. I probably would have given it 3.5, and then
you give the first 2 hours 3.5.
The first 2 hours, and then the last half. I didn't. Again, I needed the first 2 hours to get to that ending and really appreciate the ending. And I wasn't bored at all through the movie. I just felt like there, for me, was a better movie in those first 2 hours, whether it's shortened or some way tweaked slightly. But the ending ties it together and raises it to a 4 for me.
I think we've definitely, this is definitely the most extensive, exhaustive interpretation of Mulholland Drive. I don't think anyone ever needs to record a podcast after this. I think we put that YouTube channel to shame, honestly. I think we figured it all out right here.
Podcasting was a thing in 2001. And I stayed awake through this movie in 2001. Then we'd be something.
But we'd be just like Betty. We'd be so famous, and then we'd be angry, and then we'd be lesbians, and then we'd be terrorized by old people. Well, Richie, thank you again.
Thank you,
I'm glad
Shawn.
we can take this big step into this new, larger world for you. And if people want to find you out there on the internet, where can they? You
can find me on @Richie Pepio at Twitter. And, I do comedy and stuff, but, because of COVID, I don't. So you can find me hiding in a basement somewhere.
You can find me on Twitter @YayShawnDoorman. You can find me on Letterboxd. It's just Shawn Doorman.
Oh, yeah,
Richie, you're on Letterboxd.
I'm Richie Pepio on Letterboxd.
He's writing
too.
great reviews on Letterboxd. Tell the people.
Thank you. I write reviews every now and then. I'm trying to expand my cinematic consciousness. And God knows, since I took notes as I wrote, as if one was to live tweet, but only to themselves, because Twitter is evil, although I have one and I told you to follow me there. Yeah. That's it.
That's it. That's Letterboxd.
Letterboxd. Richie Pepio on Letterboxd, baby.
It's going to be great. Go check it out. It'll be great. You'll have a great time. But thank you again, Richie. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Until then, we'll see you at the movies. Thank you for listening.